John George Haigh was the serial killer from Middle England who killed the middle class.
He had no compunction and no conscience whatsoever about killing people to obtain his ends.
What would you do if the charming dry cleaner in your neighborhood turned out to be a ruthless serial killer? London's dark history. London, the bustling capital of England and the United Kingdom, is a city brimming with history and culture. It's one of the world's top-level global cities. London faced a chilling menace, the acid bath killer, John Haigh. John George Haigh's early life was anything but typical. Born on July 24, 1909, in the quaint town of Stamford, Lincolnshire, young John was the son of John and Emily Haigh. But his story doesn't start with fairy tales or bedtime stories. It begins with a strict, almost fortress-like upbringing. John's parents were devout members of the Plymouth Brethren, a fundamentalist Christian group with some pretty intense rules. Imagine a religious club that takes the Bible so seriously, they believe it's the only rule book you need. Forget about the rest of the world's distractions. This belief in sola scriptura meant that for John, the Bible wasn't just a book, it was the ultimate authority on everything, from morals to daily activities. John's father, John Haigh Sr., was a bit of a zealot about these beliefs. So much so that he decided the best way to keep his family's purity intact was to build a 10-foot-high fence around their house. Yes, a literal barrier to keep the evil outside world at bay. This was no ordinary fence. It was a towering fortress designed to keep the corrupting influences of the outside world well away from their home. His interactions with the outside world were minimal, and he was forbidden from enjoying what many might consider normal childhood activities. Instead of playing outside with other kids, John's life revolved around indoor activities. His days were filled with listening to Bible stories. Think of them as his bedtime tales, along with practicing the piano. John's upbringing was a mix of religious instruction and isolated activities, designed to instill a sense of fear and strict moral code. John Sr.'s paranoia about the outside world didn't end with just the fence. He went so far as to convince John that he was constantly under divine surveillance. As a result, young John lived in a state of perpetual anxiety, fearing that any misstep could lead to immediate divine punishment. John's childhood was marked by an almost oppressive sense of duty and fear, carefully crafted by his father's rigid beliefs. The world outside the fence was a forbidden realm, and the moral lessons John learned inside the walls shaped the early part of his life, setting the stage for the complex individual he would later become. As John Haigh grew older, the walls of his father's fortress seemed to close in tighter. By the time he reached his teenage years, he was itching to break free from the suffocating grip of his strict upbringing. Imagine a kid who has been told all his life that the world outside is a den of sin, only to find out that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't as bad as they'd been led to believe. John began testing the limits of his sheltered existence. He started dabbling in activities that his parents had labeled as sinful, things like reading books that weren't part of the Bible or listening to secular radio shows. Now, picture this: a young John, peeking through the curtains, trying to catch a glimpse of the outside world, not knowing what to expect but eager to find out for himself. One of the most eye-opening moments for John was realizing that the dreaded sin mark his father had warned him about, a bluish birthmark supposedly appearing on sinners, never showed up. This was like finding out that the bougie man was just a figment of imagination. It was a huge revelation for John. If this mark of sin wasn't real, maybe all the other warnings he'd received were also just tall tales. This realization was a game changer for John. For the first time, he felt a thrilling sense of freedom. If he could get away with defying the rules without facing immediate punishment, what else could he explore? This newfound freedom from his father's teachings was exhilarating. It was as if the entire world, once shrouded in mystery and fear, was now a playground of possibilities. John's teenage rebellion marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He started breaking away from his parents' strict rules, delving deeper into the world that had been so carefully kept from him. The once rigid and fearful boy began to explore the sinful pleasures of the outside world with a newfound sense of adventure. After finishing school, John tried various jobs. He started as an apprentice at a car manufacturer, but hated getting dirty and quit after a year. He then worked as an office clerk, an insurance underwriter, and in advertising. Despite being good at these jobs, John was always looking for the easiest way to make money. He bought a flashy red Alfa Romeo, but the thrill of honest work quickly faded. By 1934, at the age of 25, John stopped going to church and married Beatrice Betty Hamer. They lived with his parents, which was far from ideal. John then started a business forging vehicle documents. Just 3 months after their wedding, John was arrested for forgery and sentenced to 15 months in prison. Betty, pregnant and disillusioned, filed for divorce and gave their baby up for adoption. John never saw his child and saw Betty only once more when she visited him in prison, where he lied and claimed they were never legally married. After his release from prison, John moved back in with his parents and tried a new venture. He and a partner started a dry cleaning business, which was successful. But when his partner died in a motorcycle accident, John closed the business. He moved to London, where his parents finally cut ties with him. They couldn't handle his criminal past, failed marriage, and the fact that his child was given up for adoption. In London, John found a job with William McSwan, a wealthy amusement park owner. Starting as a chauffeur and machine repairman, John became close with William and his family. John's desire for easy money led him back to crime. He pretended to be a lawyer from a reputable firm, convincing people to invest in a non-existent estate. He collected fees and vanished, repeating this scam across London. Eventually, the police caught up with him, and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. While in prison, John devised a plan to steal money without getting caught. By leaving no witnesses, he decided to kill his victims and dissolve their bodies in acid. Learning about sulfuric acid in the prison's metal shop, he tested his theory on mice, calculating how long it would take to dissolve a human body. The first victim. After his release in 1943, John worked at an engineering firm and slowly prepared his plan. He rented a workshop on Gloucester Road and stocked it with sulfuric acid. In September 1944, John ran into William McSwan. They reconnected, and William invited John to his parents' house. John saw this as his opportunity. John lured William to his workshop, hit him with a lead pipe, and slit his throat. He drank William's blood before dissolving the body in acid. John then told William's parents that their son had fled to avoid the war, and they believed him. The McSwan murders. In July 1945, John lured William's parents, Donald and Amy, to his workshop. He killed them the same way and dissolved their bodies. John forged documents to gain control of their properties, selling them for a hefty profit. The Henderson murders. John moved to a new workshop in Crawley and met Dr. Archibald Henderson and his wife, Rose, in 1947. He lured them to his workshop and shot them both, dissolving their bodies in acid. He sold their belongings and concocted a story about them fleeing due to an illegal abortion. The final victim. In early 1949, John met a wealthy widow, Olive Duran Deacon. He invited her to his workshop to see an invention, then shot her and dissolved her body. Olive's disappearance raised suspicions, and John even drove her friend to the police station to report her missing. This bold move led the police to investigate John. Caught red-handed, police searched John's workshop and found evidence, including human remains in acid. John confessed to the murders, claiming he drank his victims' blood. He tried to use an insanity defense, but the jury didn't buy it. John was found guilty and executed by hanging in 1949. John Haigh's story is a chilling reminder of how someone charming and seemingly harmless can hide a sinister side. Always be cautious and aware of the people around you. Stay safe, and remember, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.